Hey there, my name is sjofors, and yes, as I've said many times before, you know that I'm called the Price Whisperer, and in fact, I just want to remind you that I just came out with this book. It's called The Price Whisperer. It's available on Amazon, and it's everything you ever want to know about pricing, to be honest. So please go to Amazon or do a Google search for The Price Whisperer, and you can buy it from whatever channel that you normally buy books, you know. But today I want to talk about the importance of using a price consultant, or why you want to use a price consultant in the first place, to make sure that you price your product or service correct, and that you don't leave money on the table, because that's what a price consultant do to some extent. So first, I first of all, I want to talk about why is it important to engage somebody on the pricing, and it really stems from the fact that almost all companies look at pricing from a very simplistic point of view, or they don't put a lot of resource onto pricing. A typical company, obviously, they're doing everything they can to control their cost. They're doing everything they can to increase their sales volume with marketing and marketing campaigns, and hiring the best salespeople and training the best salespeople and so forth. On the cost side, they put in expensive software to control cost, and just to make sure that they have the lowest cost possible. Pricing is often an afterthought, and in many companies I've been with, pricing becomes an issue when you're launching a new product, and the salespeople need a price list, or prices need to go up on the website, or there need to be prices for a new press release, or there's a trade show, and if nobody knows what the price is, how are you going to be able to tell visitors to your booth at the trade show? So pricing is often, not always of course, but often a bit of an afterthought, and when it is, companies often use very simplistic ways of looking at pricing. They maybe try to find the price list of a competitor, which almost never works. They may try to look up prices online of a competitor and set this similar price. That also doesn't really work, for a couple of reasons I will say mentioned here, or they use simple gut feel or guesses, or they think they know the market price. But none of these are, or they use cost plus. They calculate their cost, and then they say, well, let's add a margin on that. And in our industry, we have a rule of thumb margin that's going to be X, so we add X to the cost of our product or service. And all of those methods have in common that they leave money on the table. But let's examine them a little bit one by one. First off, to find a competitor's price list is pretty darn hard. You can talk to maybe joint customers, but I'll tell you, they'll be very reluctant to actually disclose what your competitors are offering them for similar product or services that they buy. And often maybe you can get a price list from a friendly reseller maybe, but it's often the last year's price list. It may be the international price list. It may be the GSA schedule that companies use to sell to the government, and it's almost always incomplete. So understanding what a competitor pays is very difficult, you know, from a price list point of view. And then you still don't know what kind of deals and discounts and bundles and all kind of stuff the competitor does. So it's not a very good data point for pricing. And the same thing, even if their competitive prices are on the website, you don't know what deals and what what bundles they may do. Maybe they geotag their website, so if you're in different areas, you see different prices. Maybe they change the prices 8 times a day that some retailers do to sort of hone in on what they think is going to be the best price. So also that is not a good source of pricing. And the cost plus, of course, you can calculate your cost, and different industries have different sort of rules of thumb. Sort of old school, if you like, manufacturing industry often adds 35% or maybe 50% on top of cost, and that just ends being their price. And that is a recipe for disaster. And some in other industries, like in retail, you often double your cost. In some industries, you take the cost times 5. In other industries, you take the cost times 10. And none of those price points have anything to do with what your customers are truly willing to pay, right? So why do you want to use a price consultant? Well, there's really 3 types of price consultants, and the first type of price consultants work very much like pricing managers often do in their if you have a large company, especially a manufacturing company of some kind, they often have a pricing manager of sort. And what these pricing managers often do is that they're becoming very, very good in calculating the actual cost of a product or a service, and then often they slap on that industry margin that I just mentioned, that rule of thumb margin. They do some other things, like, for example, pricing waterfall, which means that going through the whole process of looking at the price that was on an invoice, or really price of a price list to the price of an invoice, to eventually go through the whole process down to the pocket price, which is what the company actually get in the bank. And through that process, there's doing a waterfall. Every company leak out profit in mistakes, in poor judgment, sometimes in processes that are not completely solid, and including in this is off invoice rebates and kickbacks and so forth, which doesn't show up on the invoice. And it may be things like somebody is buying 1,000 of something and get the 10,000 unit discount instead of the 1,000 unit discount, and so forth. So these are processes that leak out. Maybe a company is supposed to charge shipping fees and doesn't charge the right shipping fees, and it's valuable. There's no doubt about it. And so is the more accurate definition of the cost. But that's the first level of price consultancy, really, that look at the process and really focus on the cost. The second level is to look at sales transaction analysis. And when you look at a sales transaction analysis, you have really sales volume versus profitability, or really gross margin, for a whole slew of attributes of how your company sells. It is sales volume versus gross margin for different salespeople, for different sales categories, for different regions, maybe, for different customer categories, for different payment terms, for different marketing channels and so forth, if you have that information, or sales channels. It is the same sales volume versus gross margin for different products, for different product categories, for different bundles of products and so forth. So what you get when you do this sales transaction analysis, often you see underperforming products in terms of margin. You find underperforming pieces of your sales and marketing organization, and especially sales organization, finding the folks, the divisions, the units that may be discounting more than others, and so forth, and it gives an opportunity for the company to train the people better and really understand where profits are leaking out throughout the organization. Now, in the first category, when we talk about pricing process, and in the second we talk about sales transaction analysis, these are activities that typically adds a few percent of revenue as pure profits to the company, 1, 2, 3%, something like that. And of course, that adds is not so much when you look at it on the first year, but if you look at doing these activities yearly for multiple years, which you should, of course, it adds up and it becomes a real value to the company in terms of really sort of grow the company a little bit faster. Now, the third type of price consultancy is what we do in my company, and we're very unique in this, where we do willingness to pay research. We go out to a company's marketplace. We poll the marketplace, and it's an online poll, and that includes maybe some customers to our clients. Most of it is non-customers, and from that we can accurately predict sales volume and revenue at different prices. Now, and that could be in many cases prices that turns out to be very different than what a company actually had priced its product or services at. But that's just a very first step, because then we take that prediction of sales volume and revenue, and we segment it by different customer categories, so we can advise our clients on these are the customer category, or this is the customer category you should focus on, the customer segment you should focus on with this persona, because it's going to lead to the highest sales volume and the highest revenue. We do the same with product or service features. We can identify which of them lead to the highest sales volume and revenue, and we say to our clients, use this in your promotions because it's going to increase your sales volume and revenue. And if you haven't yet developed them, you know what you should develop. And the same with marketing. We say these are the marketing channels, these are the marketing messages that are most effective in driving demand and interest in your product or service. And the same with sales. These are the sales channels, and these are the sales messages and methodologies that leads to the highest sales volume and the highest revenue. And finally, we can, from that original prediction, we can assess what pricing strategy will lead to the highest, I should say, the lowest level of sales friction and the highest possible sales volume and revenues. So it really becomes a whole recipe to elevate a company to the next level. And because of that, when this is acted on within a company, it's not about a couple of percent here and there. It's about a complete transformation of a company. It could be increasing sales volume with 25, 30, 40%. It could be increasing profitability with 50%. There are outliers, of course. I have clients who easily doubled in size over a year. With this rapid growth also comes a very, very, very quick improvement in shareholder value, which is obviously very important for the owners of the company, which whether there are owners working in the company is important, or if they're if they're investors that own at least a good portion of the company, they would be very interested in that rapid increase in shareholder value, because that's that's what they care about, of course. So anyway, three types of price consultancy: those who look at cost and add a fixed margin, those who and process, those who look at sales transaction analysis, sales transactions, and from that trying to find out where the most profit comes from. And the third, which is my category, where we focus on willingness to pay research, which truly transforms our clients, can transform a company very quickly to the next level. All right, thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to see you the next time. Cheers, bye-bye.